You want to know what truly wounds a woman. It isn't shouting, it isn't ignoring her, and it isn't pleading for her comprehension. It is that single action most men avoid because it demands fortitude, quietness, and restraint. And once she recognizes what you have done, it will stay with her forever. This isn't about manipulation. It is about the transformation that occurs when a man finally awakens and stops offering his inner calm to someone who never valued it. The man who embodies this is not the one who broadcasts his leaving. He is not the one who issues threats or attempts to load her with guilt. He simply reaches a realization she never anticipated. A realization born not from rage or resentment, but from a deep, unwavering acknowledgement that his worth was never tied to her capacity to perceive it. And that realization, once it embeds itself in his core, transforms everything. It alters his stride, his speech, the way he meets his own reflection. It shifts the energy he projects, and she perceives it before she can even name what has occurred. That is the force of a man who has ceased justifying himself. That is the dawn of something she never foresaw. Initially, she fails to detect the change. She assumes you remain present, still expectant, still hoping, because that has always been your pattern. You were perpetually the one who cared excessively, the one who remained awake late attempting to mend what she would not acknowledge was fractured. The one who over-explained to soothe her quietness, the one who excused her sharp remarks, her fluctuations, her repeated withdrawals. You offered her your heart, convinced she would acknowledge your dedication, but she did not. She perceived a man who would not depart, a man who continued to offer despite receiving little in return. And inwardly, she confused your affection with frailty, so she grew at ease, overly at ease. She assumed she had time to choose, time to push you aside and reclaim you when convenient, time to treat you as an alternative, because you consistently returned. She grew accustomed to the cadence of your commitment, the predictability of your endurance, the assurance that regardless of her chilliness, you would remain when she glanced back. That assurance became her solace, and solace became her entitlement. She started to view your love as a mere given, something she need not merit or sustain, something that would endure any disregard she directed at it. But something changed, and it was not loud, not theatrical, but hushed. You did not force the door open, you did not compose a lengthy text, you did not share quotes or engage in tactics, you simply ceased. You stopped pursuing her moods, you stopped attempting to decipher her conflicting signals, you stopped replying to her quietness with lengthy messages. You did not raise your voice, you did not weep, you did not offer reasons. You simply grew silent. And that composed, serene quietness, it lands differently because it does not resemble fury. It does not resemble resentment. It resembles liberation. For the first time, she senses something she never anticipated from you, separation. But not the type where you continue to hope from a distance, not the type where you feign moving forward while still observing. This separation is distinct. It conveys, I am no longer in wait. I am not striving to be sufficient for someone who could not recognize it. I am selecting myself now. And that awareness, it does not merely wound, it unsettles her. Because once a man who genuinely loved you stops making an effort, there remains no guide to influence him with, no blame, no silence, no strategy. You finally release your hold, and nothing pains her more than understanding that the man she believed she could always come back to no longer inhabits that place. The change in influence, it begins subtly. You stop responding instantly. You stop inquiring, are you all right? When she withdraws, you stop dissecting every word she utters, wondering its significance. You used to pursue her validation. Now you cherish your tranquility. You used to diminish yourself merely to evade disagreement. Now you speak less and convey more, and she perceives it. Initially, she believes it is merely a temporary phase, that you are acting detached to provoke a response. She expects you to relent as before, but this instance is different. You are not being unfeeling. You are not playing games. You are simply finished with performing, finished with being the one who perpetually strives harder, finished with being emotionally accessible to someone who used quietness as a weapon, finished with demonstrating your value to someone who treated it as unremarkable. And that transformation unsettles her, because she was accustomed to directing the tempo. She understood how to draw you near, then drive you away, then draw you near once more. But now you have become still, composed, inaccessible. She projects hostility, you do not react. She attempts to provoke conflict, you remain composed. She withdraws, and for the first time, you do not pursue. That quietness, that composed energy, it does not merely bewilder her, it reveals her. It demonstrates to her that what she believed was authority was only feasible because you permitted it. Now she has no sense of her position, because the man who used to circle her emotions now revolves around his own principles. She is unaccustomed to this version of you, the one who values peace above her approval, the one who can step away not to penalize her, but to safeguard his own thoughts and emotions. And that is what wounds most deeply, because when you are no longer governed by her turmoil, her moods, her manipulations, she understands something frightening. She never possessed authority, she merely had entry, and now she no longer does. That entry was a privilege she squandered, a gift she regarded as an entitlement. She assumed your focus was an endless resource, something she could access whenever she desired, something that would never exhaust. But she misjudged. She did not recognize that even the most enduring man has a boundary, a point beyond which his affection transforms into something else, something she cannot identify because she has never witnessed it before. That something is self-regard, and once it stirs, it does not recede. It becomes the silent guardian that protects his serenity, the quiet voice that reminds him of his value when old patterns attempt to drag him back, and she senses that new energy when she is near you. It is not antagonistic, but it is also not inviting as it once was. It is merely present, composed, whole without her, and that completeness, that sense of a man who is sufficient alone, is the one element she cannot influence. She cannot burden him with guilt. She cannot charm him. She cannot negotiate with him. She can only observe him stand in his own brightness and realize that she is no longer the origin of its warmth. When she observes you serene, there is an instance, a quiet instance, when she looks at you and you do not resemble the man she recalls. You are not resentful. You are not distant. You are not pursuing. You are merely serene. You are living your existence focused on your endeavors, spending time with authentic companions, smiling in ways she has not witnessed before, smiling as if you are liberated. And that is when it strikes her. She did not fracture you. She liberated you. The man who once awaited her replies does not wait for anyone now. The man who once requested her attention now draws it without any effort. She sees you share a photo, not with another person, but with yourself, appearing vibrant, composed, unreachable. And in that fleeting moment, she recalls how you used to brighten when she entered, how you used to alter your plans just to please her, how you used to bear the burden of the relationship on your shoulders, and now she is observing you exist, and she is not included. You are not progressing to provoke her envy. You are not posting updates to capture her focus. You are simply being yourself, finally. And that is the wound that cuts more deeply than any dispute, any breakup, any farewell, because she understands you did not merely release her. You released your need for her, and nothing unsettles a woman more than observing the man she once undervalued flourishing in a life where she is no longer even a consideration. She assumed you would be shattered, but you are improved. She assumed you would remain in the shadows, but you are in the sunlight, and she is not even in the image. That is not retaliation. That is recovery. And for her, that pains more than anything she ever envisioned, because it compels her to face the uncomfortable reality that she was never the center of your existence. She was merely a temporary resident of a space, always meant to be occupied by something greater, something she could not offer. When you stop offering explanations, there is a type of quietness that communicates more than countless phrases. And when you attain that point where you cease clarifying yourself to her, that is when everything transforms. You see, you used to clarify your emotions, your motives, your every action. You clarified why you cared, why you remained, why you forgave. Hay clears throat. You clarified your quietness when you were pained, and your words when you felt misinterpreted. But none of it mattered, because she was not listening. She was not attempting to comprehend. She was attempting to manage the narrative. And you kept granting her influence. Every time you clarified yourself to someone who had already formed her opinion, you handed her the rope she would eventually use to entangle you. But then one day you cease. She initiates her customary routine, the blame, the fault-finding, the distortion of the story, and you offer nothing. No defense, no clarification, no pleading for her to perceive your perspective. You let her speak, and when she finishes, you simply nod and step away. Not in rage, not in retaliation, but with a composed heart, because you finally grasp something profound. You owe no explanations to someone who never respected the truth, and that quietness, that composed, unshakable stillness, resonates more intensely than any words ever could, because it is not quietness born of fear, it is quietness born of power. She cannot distort it, she cannot exploit it, she cannot govern it, and that is when the burden of everything she did begins to settle back on her. The man who once fought to be understood is now the man who does not require understanding. And nothing causes a woman to regret her decisions more than realizing she lost the one person who was willing to explain himself until he understood she was never worth explaining to. The Stoics recognized that the greatest triumph is not over others, but over one's own urges. Epictetus taught that we are not troubled by events, but by our interpretations of them. In walking away from her disorder, you are not fleeing from her. You are moving toward yourself. You are reclaiming the capacity for choice, the prohairesis, which is the core of human liberty. You are choosing to no longer be a figure in her narrative. You are choosing to be the writer of your own existence, and that decision, once made, cannot be reversed. It becomes the foundation upon which you reconstruct everything. Seneca wrote that no one is more miserable than the person enslaved by their own cravings. And your craving for her approval, for her acknowledgement, for her affection, that was the chain that restrained you. But now you have shattered it. Not by resenting her, but by cherishing yourself more. Not by dismissing her, but by embracing your own value. That is the transformation she perceives in you, the one that leaves her speechless and defenseless. She is accustomed to men who compete for her, who argue, who implore, who attempt to demonstrate their value through words. She is not accustomed to a man who simply releases his grip and becomes complete on his own. That is a different form of power, one that does not need to announce itself because it is already whole. This was never about vengeance. It was never about acting distant, and it was never about making her envious. This is about ascending. It is about standing tall after being neglected. It is about discovering your strength in the quietness. It is about choosing your serenity over her disorder, your self-respect over her psychological games, your future over her ambiguous signals, because when a man genuinely learns to value his time, his emotions, his calm, and his worth, he stops pursuing people who never merited him. He stops pleading for the minimum. He stops anticipating others to recognize his value, and instead, he becomes remarkable. Not because he aimed to be, but because his absence resonates more profoundly than his presence ever did. And those who did not value him, they recall. They recall the quietness, the way he did not dispute, did not clarify, did not resist. They recall the separation, the way he withdrew, not to penalize but to preserve his spirit. They recall the moment, the exact day he ceased appearing with a heart they never took care to safeguard. That is Stoicism. That is masculine strength. That is what it signifies to become a man who moves in serenity, not disorder. Because in a world full of men trying to prove themselves, the man who does not feel the need is the one they never forget. And that is the day she understands you were not just another man pursuing her. You were the gift she failed to recognize, and now she never receives that opportunity again. But this is not a narrative about her. It is a narrative about you. It is about the day you faced the mirror and saw someone worthy of protection. It is about the day you stopped gauging your value through her perspective and began measuring it through your own. It is about the day you understood that your serenity is non-negotiable, that your time is not limitless, and that your heart is not a playground for those who treat love as a pastime. That day, you became a different man. Not a tougher man, not a colder man, but a more transparent man. A man who understands what he desires and what he will not endure. A man who can navigate the fire of another's apathy and emerge on the other side not damaged, but purified. That is the alchemy of Stoic practice, converting every obstacle into a lesson, every refusal into a new direction, every loss into emancipation. And when you embody that, when you live that, you need not declare it. People perceive it. They perceive the difference in your grip, your look, your stance. They perceive the lack of need in your energy. And that absence, that freedom from yearning, is the most appealing quality you can ever display. So, if you have ever withdrawn from disorder, if you have ever selected peace over spectacle, If you have ever stopped clarifying yourself to someone who never cared, recognize that you have performed something courageous. You have disrupted a pattern that could have overtaken you. You have reclaimed a fragment of yourself that was held captive, and you have demonstrated to yourself that you are not defined by anyone's failure to perceive your worth. You are defined by your own capacity to perceive it. The world is filled with individuals who will extract from you as long as you permit them. But the moment you stop offering, the moment you stand still in your own strength, the dynamic transforms permanently. She may not articulate it. She may not even acknowledge it to herself, but internally, she understands what she forfeited. And you understand what you acquired. You acquired yourself. And that is worth more than any relationship that was never genuinely reciprocal. The Stoic concept of ataraxia, inner tranquility, is not a passive condition. It is an active accomplishment. It is the outcome of countless minor decisions to prioritize your own well-being over the approval of others. It is the product of discipline, of declining to be drawn into the whirlpool of another's unresolved disorder. And when you experience that tranquility, you will never exchange it for the fleeting highs of acknowledgement from someone who cannot accommodate you. You will guard it with the same intense devotion you once extended to her. That is the evolution. That is the emergence. And it is beautiful. So, inhale deeply. Sense the burden that has been removed. Notice how much lighter you are without her expectations weighing on your shoulders. Notice how much sharper your mind is without the persistent noise of her interpretations. You are free. And freedom, when it is authentic, is the most potent force on earth. It is what she detects when she encounters you now. It is what causes her to pause, what makes her curious, what makes her wish she had acted differently. But her wishes are no longer your responsibility. Your responsibility is your own existence, your own development, your own calm. And that is precisely where your focus belongs. If this struck a chord, if any segment of this story echoes your own, then you are already on the journey. You are already engaged in the effort. Continue forward. Continue selecting yourself. Continue safeguarding your peace. And remember, you do not need to struggle for what is destined for you. You only need to stop struggling to be noticed by those who never merited you. In that space, in that stillness, you become the man she will never forget. Not because you aimed to be memorable, but because you finally became who you were always meant to be. And that is the ultimate victory. That is the quiet power of a man who understands his worth. That is the strength that emerges from silence, the dignity that comes from release, and the peace that follows from letting go. You have arrived. Now, embody it.